Good afternoon, West in the world. It is Thursday, April the 21st, and this morning in our outdoor class, we were talking about the theme of decolonization. I've fallen way behind in making these videos, a function I'm afraid of not being in my office nearly often enough these days. So I do want to take this opportunity to remind you that there are many videos on this channel in its archive, and that you can resort back to those, scroll back through. They won't be exactly what we've been talking about, but the big ideas will certainly be there. So I'd encourage you to consider that as an option if you find these have been helpful for you. But especially because today's class was outdoors, and there will not be a PowerPoint presentation to put online to kind of reflect what we talked about, it seemed especially important that I make one of these videos and give you some kind of guidance in terms of what we have been discussing and what to try to hold on to out of this class. So, what were the big ideas that we were talking about? Well, we were setting up decolonization as the kind of fourth great theme of the 20th century. World War I, World War II, Cold War, decolonization. And in doing that, we used sort of three different case studies to get at different facets of the Cold War. We started class with some reflection on the events in Rwanda in 1994, when you had 500,000 Tutsi massacred by their Hutu neighbors in the Central African country of Rwanda. And we tried to unpack how something like that could happen, and why perhaps the explanation, oh, that's just a product of long-seated hatred and tribalism, is not entirely satisfactory. And what we said is that in many ways, this concept of difference and the divisions between Hutu and Tutsi are made, well, at least more permanent and more deeply meaningful, specifically by the experience of Belgian colonialism. And so, for example, we talked about how the Belgian decision to issue ID cards to people created a kind of permanent fissure between what it meant to be Hutu and what it meant to be Tutsi, and there could be no interaction between those, and what kinds of opportunities a person would have would be determined by that identity. And that even though colonialism ended in Rwanda in the 1960s, the lingering effects of those decisions were still being felt as far down the road as 1994. We then talked about two other case studies that offered models for decolonization and for its effects on the world, specifically through the lens of the life of Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam and Mohandas Gandhi in India. We said that there are a lot of parallels in the lives of these two men. They grew up in families of modest means but relatively high political activity. Both of them travel abroad at a young age, especially in their early 20s, and are dramatically affected by what they witness. As it happens, both of them spend a fair amount of time, or spend some significant time, in South Africa and learn something from their experience there. In the case of Ho Chi Minh, we talked about his evolution in the direction of communism, and how he found in the ideas of Lenin and his critique of imperialism and the position of Karl Marx an ideology that he thought would accomplish his ultimate end, the independence of the Vietnamese people. We talked also especially about why that position led to so much conflict in Vietnam between 1946 and 1975, in the First Indochina War against the French, and then the war against the American-supported government of South Vietnam between about 1965 and 1973, and why it was, for example, that America simply was not willing to allow Vietnam to go its own way in terms of domino theory and American concerns about the Cold War. So the Ho Chi Minh case tells us a lot about decolonization in its violent manifestations and in its Cold War context. The Mohandas Gandhi situation, we said, plots a different course. We talked a little bit about his vision of nonviolence and mass action to try to confront the British government with the truth and with its refusal of rights to its Indian subjects, and how this eventually leads, after World War II, to the creation of an independent India and an independent Pakistan. We need to understand that Gandhi especially makes use in that moment of that language of the Atlantic Charter, which we mentioned in the context of World War II, and also understand how it is that he comes to his death, trying to quell violence created by this the unrest in the separation of India from Pakistan, and then the vision of Jawaharlal Nehru as he tries to lead India forward from there, trying to chart this course of non-alignment separate from the dynamics of Cold War spheres of influence, the Soviet Union and the United States. So there's a lot of different sort of facets of all of this, trying to understand why this is the moment when decolonization is taking place. Next week, we'll wrap this course. We'll talk a little bit about sort of the end of the Cold War, as well as also reflect a little bit in ways that are connected to this decolonization question on the legacies of all that we've talked about in shaping the world of today. Looking forward to having those final conversations with you. See you next week.